Your life journey doesn't stand still, and neither should your wealth. Welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. And welcome back to another episode of Wealth on the Move, the podcast. My name is Will Hoffman, your host, and we have a very special and important guest today, and important because as a financial advisor for 22 years now, our paths always cross with the paths of lawyers. We are all trying to accomplish the same thing for our clients, just in different avenues. And we often need lawyers' help, either confirming some of our recommendations or executing some things. And hopefully they view us as the same way as being helpful when we're working with our clients and making recommendations because, unfortunately, all this money that we accumulate is going to pass at some point, unless you want your last check to bounce, which is a perfectly reasonable goal. But making sure that passes as effectively as possible is very, very important. It's a very important recommendation that we make for our clients. And today we have a local guest from the Pittsburgh area. So today we have Ashley Sharek from Entrusted Legacy Law, north of the city of Pittsburgh. Now we're east, but all regions of Pittsburgh are friendly and share the same dialect. She is a state attorney that is focusing on helping families in a much different way that we're going to learn about than the typical wills and trusts and just making sure you have documents, which is important. As fiduciaries, follow through is 90% of the job with our recommendations. And Ashley has recognized that is a hole in the legal sense and has tried to fix that. So much so that in 2023, she had earned the third fastest growing law firm in the United States by Law Firm 500. I'll let you tell the rest of what you do, Ashley, but welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast.
Thanks, Will. Happy to be here. I started my own law firm in 2018 with a mission to do estate planning different and to do estate planning better. I have worked in this space since I was in law school. I actually law clerked at a firm that did it the right way. And so that was the way I learned how to do it. And then I graduated from law school, got a job at a big firm, and quickly realized most law firms don't do it the right way. They are in the business of selling people forms, selling people a transactional experience. And it's, here's a stack of paper, have a nice life, have your family tell us when you pass away.
Have a good safe and put my business card on the papers, right?
Right. Yeah. Tell your family to call me when you die. And I just realized that wasn't the right way to do this. There's a huge gap in planning where people go their whole life thinking that what they have is going to work. And they have no idea that when they pass away, they actually left a mess for their family because they're not here anymore. So, I started my firm with a goal of doing estate planning better. I felt like there was a way that we could have a more heart-centered approach, have a more relationship building experience with our clients. Our goal at the end of the day is, we want to work with people that are good people, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of. And for everybody in Pennsylvania, 85% of estate planning is going to be the same, but it's that last 15% that will kind of make or break. Does their plan actually do what they want them to do? Does it work the way they want it to work? Is it protecting things the way that things need to be protected? What if they have a special needs child or, somebody with an addiction issue or somebody just is disabled? There's certain things that have to be done in there to make sure that it's working the way they want it to work. So, that's really our goal. Our office is in the Wexford-Warrendale area, but we serve all of Pennsylvania. So as lawyers, we're licensed by state. So I have clients here, Erie, Philadelphia, kind of, everywhere in between. I grew up in Westmoreland County, so I do have a good bit of clients out that way.
Yeah, right up the road from me.
Yeah. Small world. But so, our goal is always, we don't want somebody to be hindered by geographic location. Mm-hmm. We actually will do a concierge service for some of our elderly or sickly clients that maybe can't travel or they're bedbound or housebound because of, they're just not able to get around like they used to. Nobody wants to drive into the city.
Sure.
So we made our office so it's really convenient. So even our clients from the South Hills can get to us in 30 minutes. People out east can get to us in, 40 minutes, hop on the turnpike. So, and we'll travel to people if they really need it. We can actually kind of bring the office to them with the witnesses and the notary for the signing. I never want somebody to not have proper estate planning because of where they live.
So before I ask you about your process, because I want to know that, and I want our listeners to know that. You just touched on something that I want to ask about, because we probably very similar to you. Have a lot of clients that snowbird in the South, especially this morning as we're waking up to a little bit of snow on the ground. If they haven't left, they're on their way out right now. How does that work? Does it matter where they're a resident? Does it matter where they pass away? How does that work if they do snowbird in Florida but are a Pennsylvania resident?
So we have a lot of those because, to your point, nobody wants to be here when it's gross
Right.
out, or in April when it's still snowing. Nobody wants that. So, it's based on domicile. So if they are still a Pennsylvania resident, you can only be a resident of one place. So that is where you file taxes, where you vote, where you live, one extra day of that half of the year, where your driver's license is from, those kinds of things. That's really what determines where somebody is domiciled. So if they're snowbirding and they were to pass away in Florida, they're still a Pennsylvania resident. Their estate would still be open in Pennsylvania. Doesn't matter that they passed away in Florida. Now, where that causes an issue is it ends up with a probate issue in multiple states. You own things in multiple states, which is super problematic and a very common thing for people in Pennsylvania because of, I don't want to be here year round. I want to have a timeshare somewhere, a beach condo. I want to go stay somewhere in the winter. So yeah, it's based on where somebody is domiciled. We do have people that will switch domicile at some point, and that's fine too. I actually have a Florida attorney that I co-counsel with a lot. So when we have to make that switch from Pennsylvania documents to Florida documents, the good thing about Pennsylvania is all of our documents are non-statutory, meaning they will follow you wherever you go.
Okay.
Which is not the same for other states. So when people move to Pennsylvania from like Ohio has a bunch of statutory documents, which doesn't work when you're not in Ohio.
Right.
Florida's got a ton of healthcare documents that are very specific to Florida and Florida laws. So usually what we tell people is when they change residency, we just add on those documents that they need for, Florida state specific laws, but everything else they have from PA will still kind of follow them where they go.
Good. Okay. I didn't want to, stop our flow there, but that's a common question.
Yeah.
And to your point with your process, I can't tell you how many times clients come in. And this was, it sounds like our motivations were very similar because we would meet with folks that had financial plans that were drafted 5 or 6 years ago that haven't been followed up on, haven't been funded appropriately. And it was done to elicit a transaction. Here's a financial plan, buy this annuity, buy this life insurance, use this mutual fund. Okay, that's fine. And they have what they feel is a plan that's working for them, but unless there's any follow through, there's nothing that's happening except for a very expensive fire starter. And part of that would include a lot of the legal things. We think, make sure you get your wills taken care of, make sure you get your trust documents. Okay, I have this trust document, but I don't know what's supposed to happen. So it sounds like our processes are very similar and derived for the same reason, is to make sure that the follow through is done, is accurate, and folks are getting the best of their professionals. Can you talk a little bit about your process of how you do things and why you've chosen to do this a bit differently?
Yeah, for sure. Anytime we have a new potential client come in, our initial process is, maybe they came to an event that we did to get some of the basic background education, or they watched a webinar. If not, they do an intro call with my office to kind of go over, hey, here's how we work. Here's how we're different. Here's a ballpark of what our fees are. One of our core values is to be super transparent. So we are transparent through the entire process, including, how we charge and what we do for that fee before we know anything about the person who's coming in. We never want somebody to think we picked a number based on what we know about them. So we always give that information first because we don't pick that number based on how much somebody has in assets, how many houses they own, anything like that. So, our goal is to, do all of that. They fill out a little homework for us ahead of time so that I can come to the meeting prepared, knowing, okay, what are your goals? What concerns do you have? Generally, what are your assets? I don't need to know down to the penny. I don't need account numbers. I surely don't want your social security number.
Right.
I don't need any of that for what I'm doing. So why would I ask for any of that? I always tell people my goal is to know where the assets are, ballpark value, and how they're titled. Are they joint? Do they have beneficiaries? If it's an annuity, is it qualified or non-qualified?
Right.
So I can give them a good idea of here's how your assets will pass when you pass away. So we focus a ton on education. I hope that everybody who meets with me comes to something, hears me speak, they learn something that they can take away and know more than when they started, because there's just so much misinformation out there and so many things that people read on the internet or their neighbor told them or, whatever. So a big part of our process is kind of educating people on, here's what these things actually do. Here's what they actually look like. Here's what your estate actually will do. Here's all the things that have beneficiary designations over here. Here's everything that can't have a beneficiary on it that's going to go through the probate process. Then we talk about what is probate, what is that going to cost your estate, and are you okay with that? And if you're okay with that, that's totally fine. And if you're not okay with that, it's okay, what's behind door number 2? Because that doesn't sound like a good option, for my family. So we really talk through all of that and then tell them, hey, these are the documents that accomplish your goals. So at the end of the day, they're empowered to make a decision that says, hey, this is what makes the most sense for our clients. We're not in the business of selling anybody paper. We're not in the business of overcomplicating somebody's estate plan where we give them 7 things that they don't need just because it makes us more money. Our goal is to keep it simple,
Well, and you've touched on something that we often get as pushback when we tell our clients, even if it's just something as simple as a will, you need to get these things accomplished, or you need to follow up and make sure your will is still accurate. And their pushback is always, yeah, but every time I call, the register's getting wrong. And
Right.
It's just a simple question. It sounds like you've been able to address that with your process. Am I right?
Correct. Yes. So we do everything on a flat fee. So the client knows if they decide, okay, we want to work with Ashley's office, we like their process, we like their style. We're not typical lawyers. We don't wear suits. We're not in a stuffy downtown office. If that's the approach you want, we're your people. But that flat fee covers phone calls, emails, calls. I have a call this afternoon with somebody's accountant. They're not getting charged from me. If I talk with the financial advisor and say, hey, here's how we need beneficiaries updated or accounts retitled, they're never going to pay for that. So they don't have to worry about every time I send an email, make a phone call, or my financial advisor, reaches out to Ashley's office, it's going to cost me money, because we don't work that way. I used to work at a big firm where that's all they cared about was billable hours. And
Right.
that's the way big firms and lawyers, that's the way we're wired and the way we're supposed to work. But the clients realize that, and they realize it isn't going to be beneficial to me to keep asking questions because it's going to cost me more money. So then people end up with plans that aren't actually what they want because they didn't understand the first time. And then they realized, well, shoot, I'm not going to ask more questions because it's just going to get more expensive, and it doesn't actually work. That's also why a lot of time there's no follow through when somebody does a trust. There's a nice CYA letter from the law firm that says, go fund your trust.
Right.
They don't know what that means. They don't know what they're supposed to do, and they don't ask, or they know they're supposed to do something and we're all busy and people forget, and there's no follow-up from the law firm. So, we tell our clients, if you're going to do a trust, it's an amazing estate planning tool for a lot of people. It has to actually work. You have to actually put things into it and make them titled correctly, or else it doesn't do anything. And so that's part of our process that's built into our flat fee. And we have built relationships with banks. We have built relationships with credit unions. We have all the beneficiary forms for like the big companies online for people to update beneficiaries. We have figured all of that out, and we will bug and annoy people for 120 days after they do their signing. I don't care if they fund their trust because they're like, please make Ashley's office leave us alone. We did it. At least I know it works, and then piggybacking on that, this is not something you do once and you say, look, I adulted, I'm done, I can put it in the filing.
I adulted.
I'm good. It doesn't work that way. It's one of these things that it's like, people having, quarterly or annual meetings with you. We go to the PCP annually to get a checkup. It's one of those things that you want to keep tabs on to make sure it's still working.
Right.
Most of the time, it's not because the legal documents need to change, but assets change. You buy a new house, you move banks, you get a new job. So all of your retirement accounts are in a different place. So we actually do yearly check-ins with our clients. It's an automated email, but it just says like, hey, did any of these things happen in the last year that we need to know about? And then every 3 years, we do a review with them and say, this is what your plan does. This is the people that you've got listed in it. Here's what happens when you both pass away. Here's where all your assets are. Is that still the way you want it?
And again, that review is included in their upfront first fee that your firm charges.
Correct. Now that fee doesn't cover changes in the future. So 5 years from now, if they come back and they're like, hey, we need to make an update, there's some cost associated with that. But for our existing clients, they're not paying the full fee a second time.
Yeah. That's great. That's the solution that your part of this profession has needed. And congratulations on solving that. That's an amazing thing you're doing. And if there's any other advisors listening, I know they would agree, because we make those recommendations. They're part of our, we know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to execute this. Please update these documents or go down this path. And they don't, because of the expense or the fear of the expense, right? Okay, if I have a question a month later, I'm getting a bill for a large amount of money because I had a question. Right. So it's great that you've been able to solve that. I do want you to touch on something that they're questions that we ask, they're questions that we encourage folks to get answers to, but again, because we're not allowed to give tax or legal advice, we can't really do too much with this. But our firm is focused on busy families and active retirees. So these are folks that are moving. They are creating, they're building. They hire us because they don't want to do it themselves. They don't have the capacity to do it themselves. What are documents that every one of these families should have first?
So everybody needs comprehensive planning. So They don't just need a will.
Okay.
The will is super helpful if you pass away, but more times than not, the documents that come before that, so the medical directive and a financial power of attorney, are the more powerful documents that somebody actually needs.
Okay.
So we don't believe in doing kind of one-off documents. We tell everyone, if you're going to come in, at a minimum, you're getting those 3 core documents, because we want to make sure that you're covered if there's a medical emergency, if you become incapacitated, and if you pass away. We want to make sure you're covered across the board. Our medical directive in Pennsylvania is actually kind of 3 documents all combined into one.
Okay.
So it covers a HIPAA authorization. So that's that document usually when you go to the doctor's office and they say, who can we release information to?
Right.
The HIPAA authorization. So you're saying these are the people that can have access to my information at any point during my life. If I need, an x-ray picked up, they're allowed to go get it from the doctor. If I had an outpatient procedure, the doctor knows they can talk to my family and give them this information. The second part is actually listing who can make the medical decisions in order, kind of like a phone tree.
Okay.
And I see people that have an older document from maybe 10, 20 years ago, and it just lists names, doesn't tell you who they are, doesn't tell you how you get a hold of them. And I'm like, I'm very pragmatic with all of this. Like, does it actually work? Does it actually do what you need it to do? A name in a vacuum to a doctor who doesn't know who that person is. And if you don't have the same last name, they're like, I don't know.
Especially
maybe
in an emergency, right?
Right. Like, how do we get a hold of this person? So we actually want to make sure that there's contact information listed for all of those people. So phone number, address, email, for everybody, for who can make medical decisions. We want to make sure that that's in there. The last part is the living will, which a lot of times if somebody goes in for surgery, the hospital will say, do you have a living will? Because they want to put it in your file. This is the document that's really unfun, the part nobody likes to do. Right. Nobody wants to talk about their mortality. No one wants to sit around with their family and talk about, if I'm in a vegetative state, here's the decisions I want you to make. That's not typical dinner conversation for any of us. So this document, really, as hard as it is for people to do, it makes their families' lives so much easier, because they know I'm not guessing. I'm not doing what I want. I know I'm making the right choice because it's written down. So that medical document, everybody should have, honestly, these 3 documents, most people, once they turn 18 and you're a legal adult, you should have them. Even kids that are in college, all those things their parents did for them for the first 17 and a half years magically disappeared on their 18th birthday. They need a medical directive and a power of attorney. We call it our young adult plan. We don't do the living will. I think that's way too much to ask an 18, 19-year-old to do. But giving their parents the ability to continue to help them do those things, is critical.
Now, if they're in college and out of college and in college out of state, does that document from Pennsylvania still work? I think you alluded to that at the beginning of this conversation, right? So they don't need, if they go to school in Nebraska, the document from Pennsylvania still is effective.
Correct, because they're Pennsylvania residents. Yeah. Okay. Most kids don't change residency when they're in college.
I guess so. Yeah.
So yeah, I would still.
And when we had our kind of our intro call before the episode, you had talked about something that to me was very powerful. I immediately went home and said to my wife, we need to get this squared away and probably have a conversation with Ashley, because our biggest concern obviously is our kids.
Mhm.
And if something happens, what happens with them? And we have outlined that to a degree, but you guys go a step farther, right? And make sure that parents have something very specific so that the unthinkable, if it were to occur, this is taken care of. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we do a document for anyone that has minor children. We don't charge extra for it because to me, it's just making sure they have a true comprehensive plan. It's called a kids protection plan. So basically what that does is the legal document that somebody needs that names a guardian for minor children is typically in a will.
Right.
That is not useful when the 16-year-old that lives down the street is over babysitting, the 2 and the 4-year-old. They usually don't. If the police were to show up at the door and say, oh, there was a car accident, who do we call? They usually don't say, oh, they have a will. It's in the safe in the basement.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's usually not what happens. So this to me is kind of the equivalent of I'm a child of the 80s and 90s when my parents would leave me with a babysitter.
Right. We were feral most of our lives, right?
No cell phones, none of that. My parents would leave a Post-it on the refrigerator that would say, here's the landline of the restaurant. Here's my grandparents' landline. And Ashley's allergic to amoxicillin. Where I was getting amoxicillin during a 2-hour dinner, unsure. But that was always written and my mom always stuck it to the refrigerator. So I tell people, the kids protection plan is the more modern legal version of that Post-it that my mom used to leave on the refrigerator. So we actually name short-term guardians, so the people that are close and local and who can get there the fastest, because a lot of times the long-term guardian somebody is naming is their brother that lives in California. Well, if we're in Pennsylvania, they're not getting here in 30
Right.
minutes. Or if they live in Philadelphia and you're in Pittsburgh, they're not getting here in 30 minutes. So, who's close and local that is a familiar face for your kids that they would be comfortable.
If that wasn't in place, so this was the scary thing. If that's not in place, kids are in some sort of temporary care position, right?
They go temporarily, they go to CYS until they can.
So
remember.
as well-meaning as local grandparents may be, the authorities are going to say, sorry, Grandma, you can't take the kids. They do need to go to this temporary CYS.
If they can track down a local family member, but a lot of times they don't know who that is, and
Sure.
it takes them a few days to do it.
Okay.
So, and if there isn't family that's local, or you have a local family member, but you're estranged from them and they're the last person you would want,
Right. Well, back to that
laughing.
snowbird conversation, something happens in the winter and your parents and their grandparents are in Florida for a few months,
Right.
and the unthinkable occurs now. So yeah, you had mentioned that, and that was just very powerful and not something we've thought about. And not something we would even encourage our clients to think about. But I mean, and nothing that Jamie and I thought about as parents is how important that could be. So it's when you say comprehensive, you guys are going way beyond what most folks have come to expect from this process.
Right. Yeah. The kids protection plan is a whole separate little lime green binder that can sit out in somebody's house. It's got pediatrician information. It's got health insurance information.
Wow.
There's a statutory Pennsylvania standby guardian form that we do for them. It's got a minor medical power of attorney in it for each child. We give the parents ID cards to put in their wallets that says like, hey, if I'm in an accident, my kids aren't with me, call these people. Actually got somebody's lost wallet returned to them.
Oh, wow. Because of that?
Love it, but it worked. So yeah, we really try to be comprehensive with everything to make sure if somebody actually has to use any of this, it's going to work the way that they need it to work.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is probate. Going through probate as an advisor with heirs, probably the least fun part of my job and of our business. And we do it, we support them, we do everything we can, but a lot of the answers to their questions, unfortunately, are out of our hands at that point. When you talk about first, what exactly is probate, what that process is, and what folks should be doing to either speed up or avoid probate altogether.
So probate is I always tell everyone the dreaded P word. It's the state's process for how assets get distributed when somebody passes away. So things that have beneficiaries on them, things that are jointly owned, those go directly to those people. We have other assets that typically can't have beneficiaries on them, like real estate.
Right.
So any land you own, house, condo, timeshare, whatever. You can't have a beneficiary on that in Pennsylvania. It's not a thing.
Right.
It's 1857 here. We're a little archaic. We don't the technology we're not up to speed like some other states are where there are beneficiary deeds. And, bank accounts, typically you can put a TOD, transfer on death, on it. I would say 9 out of 10 people don't even know that's a thing. They don't do.
Well, I mean, banks aren't really in the business of
avoiding probate
or making things easy for any of us, but that
Right.
could be a whole nother episode that we
can have a whole separate conversation about that. So those are the things that generally end up going through probate. So most people's assets kind of fork and go 2 different directions, which for a retiree, somebody with adult children, that's probably fine. But my goal is to minimize or avoid probate if and when possible for my clients. So, we are not able to avoid probate with just a will. And that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
Yes.
People think, I have a will, I'll avoid probate. I'm like, no. All that does is tell somebody what to do through probate.
Right.
The roadmap for here's who's in charge. Here's, who gets everything. Here's how my assets get distributed. That's all a will does. The will becomes public record. And, everything through the probate process is public record. Most of us don't want the whole world knowing our business because it's why, with technology, now you can do it. You can look things up from your house. You don't even have to go to the courthouse anymore. But, it's public record where your beneficiaries live. Their addresses are public record because of a document that has to be filed that you gave notice to the beneficiaries through probate. The assets that they inherit through probate become public record. So you're literally giving somebody all of that information on a silver platter. And there's people that will say, well, Pennsylvania's probate friendly. Our process isn't that bad. And I'm like, okay, maybe if you compare it to other states, like Florida takes like 5 years for probate. Sure, we're quick and speedy.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah. Pennsylvania, we only take 1 to 2 years. So
yeah, right. I always, when folks always say that, are you happy with the roads that you drive on? Like, are these the folks you want making the decision about who gets the sum of your life's work?
Right.
Is going to be in the hands of the same people who won't fix that pothole. But again, another conversation for another day.
Yeah. And I mean, there's filing fees with the county that the bigger the estate, the bigger the fee that they take. There is a sliding scale percentage fee structure that lawyers have been using since the 80s. So most lawyers, the stereotypical, I sold you a stack of paper, I will do probate when you pass away. Those lawyers are banking on making $10, $20, $30, $40,000 on an estate when it goes through probate. And, to me, I'm never looking for when somebody passes away that I can potentially make money off them. I just think that gives our occupation a bad reputation. So we want to make sure, okay, if probate's not ideal, and I ask people, I'm like, have you ever gone through probate? Have you had a loved one pass away? Were you the executor of their will? And usually if they tell me yes, they're like, it was awful. It was expensive. It took too long. Crazy things happened.
Right.
I have yet, in my 12 years of doing this, I have yet to come across the person who told me that they loved it and it was so much.
It was the best time of my life. Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah.
My kids are going to love this.
Hasn't happened yet. I mean, I'm sure that person's out there somewhere, but haven't met them. So, most people, if they've experienced that, they're like, they don't know what the other option is. They don't know what a revocable living trust means or what that does, but they're like, whatever I have to do to not go through probate, I want that option. So,
and probate is not just when the second person of a couple passes away. Spouses can go through probate if the house wasn't in their name or their vehicles were only registered to one and not both.
Vehicles actually are the one thing Pennsylvania makes easy for whatever reason.
Okay.
Most
of
all
turnpike money.
Yeah, it's not easy. The vehicle thing is actually pretty easy. There's a form you fill out. I think it's MV39 or something that you submit with a death certificate and the title, and they'll transfer the vehicle without probate.
Okay.
Which is nice. But yeah, if somebody purchased a house before they got married or their spouse just wasn't on the deed, if they had bank accounts that weren't in joint name, you potentially could have a probate issue when the first spouse passes away, which, we typically want to try to avoid probate. And, if someone's doing it, it's only when the surviving spouse passes away for a married couple. We don't want to be doing it at every along the way.
Now, because that can get expensive. You had kind of alluded to that. What's the typical expense when it comes to going through probate?
So I tell people if they're doing just a quick calculation, assume somewhere in the range of 5 to 7% of the value of the estate is what you potentially could pay in probate costs. So that's kind of factoring in everything, filing fees with the county, appraisals and valuations that need to be done on assets, attorney's fees, paying for tax returns to be done, kind of all of that. That's the general ballpark number of what you should assume probate's going to cost an estate. So a lot of times when I explain probate and I tell people, it's expensive, it's not fun, people are like, oh, mine won't be that bad. Mine's super easy.
Right.
I just have a $500,000 house.
Right.
Like,
well, and with the recent run up and the cost of everything, the value of everything has also increased. So the expense of that process has increased.
Right. So I do quick math and I'm like, okay, so let's say it's 5% and your house is the only thing that's going to go through probate and it's worth $500,000. Still $25,000 in probate fees when you add everything up. And, some lawyers charge hourly, some follow that sliding scale percentage, some take a lower percentage. That's what my office does. We take a low percentage. So you could probably call 5 different law firms that do probate and they're all going to tell you they do billing differently.
Sure.
But if they charge hourly, they've run the parameters to know what they can charge. They're not dummies.
Right.
They know how much they can charge. So, I had an estate that I was the second attorney on. The estate was worth $1.8 million because the guy who passed away owned a business. And if you followed the chart, the probate fees would have been $63,000 in attorney's fees. And so the guy came to me and he's like, well, the first law firm racked up $9,000 in bills. And I don't even really know why. They keep sending me bills and it just says they sent emails and they made phone calls. And I'm like, well, they know that they could charge $63,000 and if it goes to an audit or an accounting, they fall within the parameters of what they were allowed to charge. Needless to say, he wasn't very happy with that. And a lot of times people don't even realize because if they're paying bills monthly, they don't really think about it. They get to the end of that process that took 1 to 2 years. They add up those bills they paid monthly and they're like, holy cow, I paid $20,000 in probate fees. That's crazy. So some people can avoid probate just because of the way their assets are titled. If they don't own a house, their kid is joint on their little checking account and they have a retirement account that has a beneficiary. Effectively, they've avoided probate.
Right.
But most people don't have that luxury. People that snowbird, they end up with a probate issue in multiple states.
Right.
I have a client who just based on timeshares and condos and a rental, he had a probate issue in 4 states. I was like, your kids are going to hate you.
Wow.
Nobody wants to do this once. They don't want to go do it in 4 states.
4 times.
With 4 lawyers.
In every state, like you said, is different. And you could have it closed out in 3 of the 4 states. But if that fourth state is Florida, you've got another 3 years of this process. So then the next question we always get is, should I have a trust? Because they've realized the nightmare of probate and want to avoid that. And frankly, I'm always terrified to answer that question. I know how trusts work. I know why they're effective. I know when they're necessary. But to make that bold statement, yes, you need a trust, is often a challenge for at least for me. Our next thing is call an attorney. Ask them, let's go see an attorney together so that we can, I can answer the questions that you don't know the answers to, and they can say, yes, you do, or no, you don't. What's your approach to, one, seeing if folks need a trust, whether it's, and there's trusts that it can accomplish so many different things. So trust is kind of a vague term. But what's your process to go through to see if folks need a trust and then what type of trust they need or could use?
So when they do that homework before they come to meet with me.
And I guess before we get to that, tell our folks, what is a trust?
So trust is from the revocable sense. So just like the name says that you can revoke it, a revocable trust is a will substitute. So people do those when they say, hey, I don't want to go through probate. I don't want to put my family through that. I want to do more of the work now to make their life easier. Revocable trusts make a lot of sense for people that own businesses. Privacy is important to them. They have real estate, timeshare, beach condo, something outside of Pennsylvania where now we've got a multiple state probate issue. People that have little kids, all of their money typically is in retirement and life insurance that has beneficiary designations.
Right.
If you've got $2 million in term life insurance and you have a 2-year-old, you probably don't want the 2-year-old to be a millionaire if something happens to you and your spouse.
Remembering
when they're
Macaulay
living.
Culkin from Richie Rich.
Yeah. So, there's the revocable trust makes a lot of sense for a lot of people for totally different reasons. People with adult children do them for different reasons than people with minor children do them. So revocable is the easy one that is, you can modify it, you can change it, everything is still yours.
Okay.
So that's the one that there's no drastic changes. Because yes, when usually you say the word trust, people glaze over and they go, oh, that's what the wealthy people have.
Sure.
That's what, the Carnegies and the Mellons have. I don't need one of those. I'm not a wealthy person. So the revocable trust is just, I don't want to put my family through probate. I want to do more work now for them to make their life easy. That's really the revocable trust, the reason for that. Irrevocable is, think of it as a treasure chest. Revocable, the lid's open. You can put stuff in and out of it. Irrevocable, you shut the lid and you put a padlock on it. Most of us don't voluntarily run around and say, hey, I want to give up ownership and control of what I've worked for my whole life. That's kind of a hard sell for most people. So there has to be a benefit that outweighs the negative for why somebody would do an irrevocable trust. So typical irrevocable trusts are special needs trusts are irrevocable because you need to protect the beneficiary so that they don't lose government benefits because their special needs are disabled. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Next one is if somebody has a high net worth federal estate tax issue, which right now federal estate tax limits are like 13-ish million per person. So we're at 27 million for a married couple. Most of us are in the clear at this point. But there are people that run into issues there. So there's certain irrevocable trusts that can get them below that limit. Nobody wants to pay 40 to 60% in federal estate tax.
Right.
Pass away. At that point,
especially on money that's already been taxed. But again, another
just take it out
conversation.
the backyard, light it on fire.
Right.
It's about the same end
At least
result.
maybe they'll fix that pothole now.
Right. So that's another reason why people do it. The most common one that we come across is people who want a Medicaid asset protection trust. And this could be literally a whole separate conversation. But this type of irrevocable trust is for someone who's worried about needing long-term skilled care. So somebody that says, I don't want the nursing home taking my house. I don't want, to spend every dollar I've saved my whole life on my care. Most people I've come to find out are okay if they have to spend their retirement money because they're like, my retirement money was to take care of me in retirement.
Right.
If I need that kind of care, I'm okay to use my money for that. Most people generally draw the line and say everything that I've saved, inherited, or built nesting for my kid, I don't want to use all of that. So the irrevocable trust in that sense is a way that we can protect certain assets. So real estate, whole life insurance, those are the easiest ones to protect. Then we can look at, potentially a post-tax brokerage, that kind of thing.
Well, man, that process, that could be another conversation for us in itself because, the way our conversations go and the reactions we see are, all right, long-term care has gotten so expensive.
Yeah.
And I may not need it.
Right.
I'm sorry, long-term care insurance has gotten so expensive and I might not need it.
Both are expensive.
But the facilities themselves are very expensive and I might not need it. But I also don't want to be a burden. How do I solve this? And it's such a challenging conversation because it's out of our control. Do I need long-term care insurance? Yes. How much is it? It's the premiums can choke a mule. They're so expensive.
Right.
That's my gears are already spinning on the next episode, but there's so much that goes into that process because the solutions are give up control or start planning for something that hopefully we don't need.
Right.
Nobody wants to go through that situation. But we watch it all the time and we know there's solutions. And that's something that I think we're going to have another conversation about because that's deep and detailed and long and affects everybody, the parents, the children, the grandchildren, whether you're retired or 30.
Right.
The ideas are there. I do want to talk to you about something that's on your website, Wear Clean Underwear. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is? And I think I can surmise what that is, but I want to hear you talk about it and what the Wear Clean Underwear book on your webpage is about.
Right. Yeah. So the Wear Clean Underwear book is a free ebook that can be downloaded from my website. It's written by one of my mentors. And it's kind of that old saying that your mom always told you to wear clean underwear. 'Cause if you were in a car accident, you went to the hospital, you wanted to have clean underwear
Right.
on. That's where the title of the book came from. But it's basically stories or case studies, however you want to look at them, of real life experiences of people who have kind of gone through the probate process or, had minor children, and kind of giving you examples of why planning is so important, why you need all of this. Everybody knows estate planning is important. Most people don't think it's urgent. And it's one of those things that people would rather color code their sock drawer than come and talk to me about their estate plan, because it's not, it's not sexy and glamorous. It's not fun and exciting to spend your money on. The bathroom remodel, new vanity sounds more exciting than an estate plan. I get all of that. So, this book is just another way to kind of reiterate, all of the things that can come up, situations that people can find themselves in, and why having a comprehensive plan is so important.
But with a title that motivates you to at least open the book, which is, that was my assumption. And I saw that, thought I said, what a great title and motivation. And the link to be able to get that book from Ashley's website will be in the show notes. So make sure you check that out. I can't wait to start reading my copy. I didn't want to cheat that on, and we're going down the rabbit hole of an idea for our podcast of a book club every quarter, doing a review of financial motivated books that just to talk about and for the folks to read. All right, so something that we have started here on Wealth on the Move, the podcast, that I took from, and I stole it. Stole is maybe an aggressive term.
Borrowed.
I've borrowed, and I just think what the Diary of a CEO podcast does a great job of linking all of their guests together through a couple of questions. So what we do is we had our last guest, Tim Smith, the financial dad, give us a question to ask our next guest, which is you. Okay. And then after that, we're going to give you the opportunity to ask our next guest, who we don't know who it's going to be yet, a question of your own. So the question from Tim Smith was, what are the best things? He actually gave us a two-part question. What are the best things you have learned in your career that you wish you had known early?
Cool. I would say you don't have to know all the answers. It doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe that's a lawyer thing, but we think we can't do something until it's perfect. Try it. If it doesn't work, try it a different way. I think just not being scared to try new things.
So then the second part of his question is, what have you learned from a failure?
I guess kind of the general answer is you learn to get back up and try again and try something different, Yeah. And that's how people are successful,
Yes.
No one that's successful failed once and just said, I think I'm done.
Yeah. I mean, look at somebody like Abraham Lincoln. His list of failures are much longer than his lists of successions. And he's he's only remembered for the times he succeeded, and the times he succeeded have changed the face of the world. Okay, so now it's your turn. What question would you like to ask our next?
And we don't know who it is.
We don't know who it is.
Okay.
Even if we did, I wasn't going to tell you.
Okay. Well, because I was going to say mine's kind of geared towards somebody who owns a business, so it might not be applicable, but I was going to say, if you could tell somebody starting out something that you wish somebody would have told you, what would that be?
Okay. Great question. All right. Well, Ashley, thank you very much. I do want to make sure that our listeners know you have an event coming up January 29th. Is that correct?
Correct.
At Bullseye Brewing in New Brighton?
Correct.
You want to talk a little bit about what you guys like to do at these events?
Yeah. So typically once a month, we do a Wine and Wills event at RCC Winery in Gibsonia.
Okay.
It's usually the first Wednesday of the month. And then we do kind of a rotating pints and planning at a different brewery.
Okay.
Just because the titles are catchy, not because we love alcohol or anything. But it's kind of a no pressure, informal setting where people can come, have a drink on us, get some light bites, and get the education around estate planning. We kind of talk through all of the documents, what they do, how they work. We talk about probate. We do a little probate exercise so they can figure out what probate potentially could actually cost them. And we explain our process. So, if somebody wants kind of a no pressure way to learn a little bit more, chat with me, get to know us, that kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely check it out. We update the website as the events update, and all that good stuff. So yeah, we typically have 2 in-person events every month.
Oh, wow.
So.
Yeah, we try to do 1 a quarter, and that seems insurmountable sometimes. So 2 a month, that's great. Well, thank you very much for your insight. Again, I already can't wait to have you back on and go through some other topics that I know are going to be some burning questions for our listeners. They're already burning questions for me. And look forward to maybe even doing some more together when it comes to videos and events and things. So thank you very much. Make sure you check out Entrusted Legacy Law's website. We'll be in the show notes. Any other thing that you want folks to know or be able to get in touch with you through?
No, I think they can. If you're going to put all that in there, that's perfect.
Yep.
So
again, thank you for listening to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. And as Bryn always says, keep your wealth moving.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hoffman Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.